The sun sank low over the scorched plains, turning the dust in the air the color of dried blood. In the far corner of a forgotten settlement, a woman lay curled beside a collapsed wooden fence, her body bruised, her spirit nearly broken. The villagers had dragged her there like unwanted refuse only moments before. She had screamed once. No one listened. She had cried once. No one cared. Her crime was simple. She had given birth to 3 girls in a land where sons were valued like gold and daughters treated as burdens. Her fate had been sealed the moment the midwife announced the truth. Her husband, if he could still be called that, had stood frozen at the foot of the bed. Then his mother's scream had shattered the room like a gunshot. By sunset, the woman had been beaten, stripped of dignity, and thrown into the dirt outside the village border as punishment for her failure. Her name was Eliza. She barely remembered how she crawled this far. Her legs trembled uncontrollably, every breath a shallow theft of air. Milk soaked her torn dress, but her arms were empty. Her newborn daughters had been taken from her the moment she was dragged outside. Somewhere behind her, in that hateful cluster of wooden shacks, 3 tiny lives cried without their mother's warmth. Eliza squeezed her eyes shut, biting her lip to keep from screaming. "Lord, if I die tonight," she whispered into the dirt, "at least let my girls live." She did not know she was being watched. Across the open field, at the edge where the world turned quiet and untamed, a lone figure sat astride a massive black horse. A rancher, broad-shouldered, silent, weathered by years of sun and solitude. His name was Caleb Gray, and most folks in the county only knew him as the man who never spoke unless necessary. He had come to the village for supplies, nothing more. He intended to leave before dusk, but then he saw them dragging her. From the shadow of his hat brim, Caleb watched as 4 men hauled Eliza through the dirt like a sack of grain. He saw the way she tried to cradle an invisible baby against her chest. He saw the blood at the corner of her mouth. He saw the crowd turn away. He felt something in his chest tighten, something old and dangerous. Caleb had lived alone for 12 years, since the fire, since the grave, since the screaming in the night that never quite left his dreams. He did not involve himself in other people's cruelty. He had learned the hard way that stepping into someone else's storm usually dragged you under too. But this was not a storm. This was an execution in slow motion. He followed at a distance. He watched where they left her. And when the men finally walked away, laughing, dusting off their hands as if they had finished slaughtering livestock, Caleb waited until the night swallowed the land whole. Only then did he ride forward. Eliza was barely conscious when she heard hoofbeats. At first, she thought it was death arriving, some dark rider sent to claim her. She tried to lift her head, but failed. The vibrations of the ground were steady, slow, careful. A shadow fell over her. She forced her eyes open. In the dim moonlight, she saw the silhouette of a man towering above her, his hat pulled low, his horse massive and still behind him. He did not look like an angel. He looked like something far more dangerous and far more real. She tried to crawl backward. Her body refused. "Please," she whispered hoarsely, "I've got nothing left to take." Caleb knelt slowly, movements deliberate so as not to frighten her. He saw the swelling on her face, the raw skin on her arms, the way she shivered despite the warm night. She ain't imagining this, he thought grimly. They really tried to kill her. His voice came low and steady. They said you gave birth to 3 girls. Her breath hitched. Tears slipped sideways into the dust. Yes, she whispered. That's why they did this. Caleb felt his hands curl into fists inside his gloves. He offered her his coat. She stared at it in confusion, fear flickering across her face. Why? Because you're freezing. I deserve it, she said weakly. They told me so. Caleb shook his head once, firm, unyielding. No one deserves this. With trembling hands, Eliza accepted the coat and pulled it around herself. The scent of leather and smoke wrapped around her like an unfamiliar comfort. Where are my babies? Caleb asked quietly. They took them. Her voice cracked. They said someone else would raise them, or sell them. I don't know. They said girls aren't worth keeping. Caleb lowered his head for a brief moment. When he looked at her again, something had shifted behind his eyes. Can you stand? He asked. She tried. Her body screamed. She collapsed with a sob. Caleb did not hesitate. He lifted her gently, as if she were made of glass rather than broken flesh, and set her on the saddle. Her head fell against his chest. I don't even know your name, she murmured. Caleb. I'm Eliza. All right, Eliza, he said. You're coming with me. Her eyes fluttered open. Why? Because they don't get to decide whether you live or die. She laughed weakly, almost hysterical. You don't even know me. I know enough, he replied, swinging up behind her and gathering the reins. And that's all I need. As the horse turned away from the village lights, Eliza felt the earth shift beneath her in a way that had nothing to do with movement. Fear raced through her. Fear of the unknown, of another cruelty waiting at the end of this ride. But beneath that fear was something more dangerous. Hope. Behind them, the village disappeared into darkness. Ahead of them lay Caleb's ranch, isolated, wide, and silent as the man who owned it. A place where lost things often surfaced again in unexpected ways. A place where fate had just altered the course of 2 shattered lives. And somewhere in the night, 3 newborn girls cried for a mother who did not yet know if she would ever hold them again. Eliza drifted in and out of consciousness as the horse carried her through the night. The rhythm of hooves against dry soil beat steadily beneath her, like a heart not her own. Each time she slipped into darkness, pain followed her. Each time she returned, she became aware of one constant: strong arms holding her upright, so she would not fall. Caleb did not speak while they rode. He did not need to. The silence felt safer than words. When the faint gray of dawn finally began to lift the black veil of night, Eliza stirred. Her lashes fluttered open to a sky she did not recognize. Endless, pale, free of smoke and shouting. The air smelled of grass and distance instead of blood and fear. They had reached the ranch. Caleb slowed the horse as a wide stretch of land unfolded before them. A weathered farmhouse stood at the center, like a lone survivor of time. A red barn leaned slightly to one side, its boards sun-bleached and scarred by old storms. Fences stretched outward in every direction, vanishing into rolling land. Eliza tried to sit up. You're safe, Caleb said quietly, steadying her with one hand. Safe. The word felt foreign on her tongue. He helped her down carefully. The moment her feet touched the ground, her knees buckled. Pain ripped through her legs. She would have fallen again if he had not caught her. "Easy," he murmured. He carried her into the house without hesitation, kicking the door open with his boot. Inside, the home was simple and clean. Rough wooden furniture, a small iron stove, a table by a window. No clutter, no softness, just survival. He laid her gently on his bed. "No," she protested weakly. "I shouldn't." "You should," he replied. "You've already lost enough." The words pierced her defenses more deeply than anger ever could. Caleb fetched water, cleaned her wounds as carefully as his rough hands allowed, and wrapped fresh cloth around her bruises. He said little, but his actions spoke in a language she had not heard in years. Patience without cruelty. When the pain dulled to a distant throb, exhaustion claimed her. She slept. For the first time since childbirth, for the first time since the beating, Eliza slept without screaming. She awoke to warmth. Sunlight spilled through the window and brushed her face gently, as though afraid of waking her too roughly. For a moment, she did not remember where she was. Then the previous day rushed back in fragments, hands on her arms, boots in her ribs, the sound of her babies crying as she was dragged away. Her breath came fast. The door opened softly. Caleb stepped inside with a bowl of broth in his hands. "Easy now," he said when he saw her panic. "You're still here." Where are they?" she whispered instantly. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Not here, yet." The truth stung more than comfort would have. He sat beside her and helped her drink. The broth burned going down, but revived her body inch by inch. For several days, Eliza drifted between sleeping and waking. Caleb checked on her regularly. He cooked for her, changed her bandages, left the door open so she would not feel trapped. He never touched her unless necessary, and when he did, it was with careful respect. On the 5th morning, she managed to sit upright on her own. "I should help," she said. "I don't want to be a burden." Caleb looked at her from the doorway, surprised. "You're not," he said simply. The word lodged in her chest. No one had ever said that to her before. She insisted on standing. Her body protested, but stubbornness carried her to her feet. She nearly fell again. Caleb stepped forward and steadied her, his hands firm but gentle at her elbows. She flinched on instinct. Something flickered across his face. Regret, perhaps. "It's all right," he said. "I won't hurt you." She studied his weathered face, the wrinkles carved by years of sun, the sadness hidden under quiet discipline. This was not a cruel man. This was a lonely one. He helped her to a chair by the window. Looking out, Eliza saw something she had almost forgotten existed. Open land without fences of judgment. Horses grazing peacefully. Wind moving through tall grass like waves on water. Her voice trembled. "Why are you helping me?" Caleb hesitated. "I lost my wife," he said finally, "long ago." The words were few but heavy. "She died in a fire," he continued, "with our child." Eliza looked at him with widening eyes. "There was screaming," he added, "the kind that never leaves you. I couldn't save them." Silence fell again. "Since then, the land's been my only company." Eliza swallowed. "Then why me?" Caleb met her gaze at last. "Because no one saved you." Her eyes filled before she could stop the tears. Days passed, then weeks. Eliza slowly regained her strength. Each day she walked a little farther. Each day her body hurt a little less. Caleb never demanded anything of her. He never asked for payment. He never made promises either. But every morning, there was food. Every night, the door remained unlocked. And every conversation, sparse as it was, carried a steady kindness. She learned the rhythms of ranch life as her body healed. How he rose before the sun, how he brushed the horses in silence, how he worked from dawn until dusk with a discipline that bordered on punishment. One afternoon, while folding clean cloth near the kitchen table, Eliza finally asked the question that haunted her. "Caleb, do you think my babies are alive?" He did not answer immediately. "I do," he said at last. "How can you be so sure?" "Because people who do evil don't destroy what they can profit from," he said bitterly. "Girls get sold, not buried." The truth crushed her like a weight. Her hands began to shake. "I need to find them," she whispered. Caleb studied her carefully. "When you're strong enough." "Then what happens to me?" she asked quietly. He did not answer that one. Late one evening, the past finally caught up with Eliza. She woke screaming. Caleb burst into the room instantly. "Don't touch them," she cried, thrashing in terror. "Please, please, I'll do anything. Just don't take my babies." He caught her wrists gently to stop her from harming herself. "They're not here," he said firmly. "You're safe." She collapsed into sobbing, her body shaking violently. He hesitated only a moment before pulling her against his chest, holding her the way one holds a frightened child, without desire, without force, only with anchoring strength. She clutched his shirt like a lifeline. "I failed them," she sobbed. "They were beaten out of my arms. I did nothing." "You survived when they tried to kill you," he said. "That's not failure." "For what?" she cried. He answered without hesitation. "So you could go back for them." Her breathing slowed. When the tears finally quieted, she realized she was still in his arms. She pulled back awkwardly, eyes downcast. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be." Something changed between them that night. Not romance, not yet. Trust. The next morning, Caleb saddled his horse before sunrise. Eliza noticed at once. "Where are you going?" "To make some inquiries," he said. Her chest tightened. "About the babies?" "Yes." Hope struck her like lightning. "I want to come." He shook his head. "Not yet." She clenched her fists. "I'm stronger now." He studied her carefully, then nodded slightly. "Soon." As the sun climbed into the sky, Eliza stood at the porch, watching him ride out across the endless land. For the first time in her life, she was not waiting for punishment. She was waiting for a future. And somewhere beyond that horizon, 3 little girls were alive, not knowing that the woman who birthed them was learning how to breathe again, so she could one day fight her way back to them. The dust rose behind Caleb's horse like a low-hanging cloud as he rode hard toward the nearest trading town. The rising sun burned gold against the horizon, but his face remained carved from stone. He had waited long enough. Healing was not just a matter of broken bones and fading bruises. It was also unfinished business. And Eliza's unfinished business breathed somewhere in the world as 3 helpless, stolen infants. By the time he reached the town, the streets were already stirring. Wagons creaked. Merchants called out. The scent of sweat, animals, and hot metal clung to the air. This was the place where things disappeared and reappeared for a price. And Caleb intended to pay no such price. He began at the only place information flowed freely, the saloon. Inside, eyes followed him as he entered. Men knew Caleb Gray by reputation alone, the man who lived beyond the ridge. The man who worked harder than 5 and spoke less than 1. The man no one had ever seen drunk, joking, or desperate. He walked to the bar. 3 newborn girls, he said to the barkeep without preamble. Taken from a woman about 3 weeks ago, from the eastern village across the dry flats. The barkeep stiffened slightly. That business ain't yours, Gray. Caleb placed a silver coin on the counter. Then another. Then another. Now it is. The barkeep glanced at the coins, then leaned closer. Word is, they were sold through a moving broker. Heads west and south. Sells what people want to forget. Caleb's jaw tightened. Name: Jonah Pike. Caleb turned and left without another word. Eliza did not sleep while Caleb was gone. She paced the porch at dawn, at noon, at dusk. Each hour stretched like torture. Her mind imagined horrors she could not silence. Cold arms holding her babies instead of her own. Strangers feeding them, changing them, selling them like livestock. She pressed her hand to her chest as panic swelled. If he fails, she thought, if he never comes back. The sound of hooves cut through the desert air. She ran to the fence. Caleb rode in as the sun dropped low, dust clinging to his boots. The moment he dismounted, she searched his face desperately. "You found something," she said. He nodded once. "Who has them?" she asked breathlessly. "A broker," he replied, "moving fast, selling faster." Her knees weakened. "Where are my daughters?" He looked at her steadily. "That's what we're going to find out next." They left at dawn the following morning. Caleb saddled 2 horses this time, one for himself, one for Eliza. "I've never ridden alone," she admitted softly. "You'll learn," he said. She hesitated only a moment before mounting. Pain still lingered in her body, but fear drove her forward, now stronger than weakness. The road stretched endlessly before them. They tracked Jonah Pike through scattered towns, abandoned camps, and whispered rumors. Each stop tore at Eliza's heart. "Yes," said a trader in one dusty settlement. "He passed through. Had 3 infants, wrapped in cloth. Girls, I think." "Alive?" Eliza asked desperately. "Crying," the man confirmed. "Very much alive." Relief nearly made her collapse. But with each lead came another cruel truth. The broker sold quickly. He did not linger. The buyers were often wealthy landowners, barren couples, or men seeking heirs where nature had failed them. Or worse. One night, as they camped beneath a sky heavy with stars, Eliza finally asked the question she feared most. What if they've already been separated? Caleb fed wood into the fire slowly. "Then we find each one." Her eyes filled. "And if someone refuses to give them back?" Caleb met her gaze across the flames. "Then I won't ask twice." The cold certainty in his voice frightened her, and comforted her. Their trail led south. In the trading post near the canyon ridge, they finally cornered their man. Jonah Pike was exactly as Caleb imagined, a thin, sharp-eyed man with the posture of someone who had never known honest work. His smile came too easily. He was mid-transaction when Caleb stepped into his path. "You sold 3 girls," Caleb said quietly. Jonah's smile barely wavered. "I sell many things." "From the eastern village," Caleb pressed. "About 3 weeks past." Something flickered in Jonah's eyes. "Those girls are long gone, rancher," he said lightly. "Profit doesn't wait." Eliza stepped forward then, her voice trembling but fierce. "Where are my daughters?" Jonah's gaze flicked to her swollen eyes, her clenched hands. "Ah," he said softly. "The mother survived. That's rare." Caleb took one slow step closer to him. Answer her. Jonah exhaled. 2 were sold together to a ranch family north of here. 1 was purchased by a man farther south. Paid double. Eliza staggered backward as if struck. The broker fled without looking back. Their first destination lay north. They rode for 2 full days without rest. Fear drove Eliza harder than exhaustion. Her hands shook on the reins. Her mind replayed images of strangers holding her babies, feeding them, naming them. The thought nearly broke her. When they reached the ranch named by Jonah, the truth cut into them both. A wealthy couple had purchased the twin girls. They had already named them. Already filled out adoption claims through corrupt networks. They're ours now, the woman insisted, clutching one infant to her chest. We paid fairly. Eliza fell to her knees. They are my flesh, she cried. My blood. I was beaten for them, left to die. The woman hesitated. The man didn't. You sold them, he said bluntly. They're not yours anymore. Caleb stepped forward. You'll return them. Silence fell over the ranch. The man reached toward his belt. Caleb was faster. His hand closed around the man's wrist before a weapon could be drawn. You keep them, Caleb said coldly, and I'll take everything else you own instead. A tense moment stretched like a wire ready to snap. The woman began to cry. Slowly, shaking, she handed one twin to Eliza. Eliza sobbed as the fragile body settled into her arms. Moments later, the second was returned. She pressed both babies to her chest and whispered their names through tears. Caleb released the man and turned away without another word. 2 were returned. 1 remained lost. They rode south next with even greater urgency. Jonah's final buyer lived across harsh desert land where law held little weight. By the time they arrived, fear gripped Eliza's heart heavily. The man who purchased the 3rd child was a powerful trader with no wife. Caleb faced him openly. You bought an infant girl, he said. She belongs to her mother. The trader laughed. She's mine. I paid for her. Eliza's knees nearly buckled. Caleb did not raise his voice. You're confusing payment with ownership. The trader's smile disappeared. The standoff ended quickly and violently. By the time it was over, the trader lay unconscious in the dirt, and the baby, crying weakly, was placed back into Eliza's trembling arms. She collapsed to the ground, sobbing openly as all 3 daughters were finally reunited against her body. My girls, she whispered again and again. My girls. Caleb watched in silence as a broken family stitched itself back together before his eyes. The journey was not over, but hope had been reclaimed. The ride back to Caleb's ranch was slower than the desperate chase that had brought them across the plains. Eliza rode carefully now, her body still healing, her arms aching from the fragile weight she refused to relinquish. 2 of the babies were wrapped securely against her chest, while the 3rd rested in a sling Caleb had fashioned from spare cloth and tied gently across his own shoulder. The wind cut across the land, warm and steady, whispering through tall grass that rolled like hidden rivers beneath the sky. For the first time since the night she had been beaten and cast out, Eliza felt something unfamiliar but precious settle into her bones. Safety. But safety, she was learning, was never permanent. It was something you fought for, and sometimes something that fought back. When the ranch finally came into view, smoke gently curling from the chimney, as if welcoming them home, Eliza's throat closed with emotion. The twins stirred at her heartbeat. The third infant whimpered softly near Caleb's chest. He dismounted first and helped her down, steadying her as though she were still broken and precious to him. She was both. Inside the house, the quiet changed instantly. The small, silent cabin that had held only sorrow and solitude for years, now filled with the fragile sounds of breathing, whimpers, and hungry cries. Life had arrived uninvited, and it refused to be silent. The first night was chaos. The twins cried in turns. The third cried whenever the room fell too quiet. Eliza moved clumsily but fiercely between them, feeding, rocking, weeping in equal measure. Every small sound made her flinch. Fear still lived in her bones. Caleb stood uselessly at the doorway at first, watching as she attempted to do everything alone. "You don't have to carry this by yourself," he said quietly. She glanced at him fearfully. "I don't know how to share them. I almost lost them forever." He stepped forward and gently lifted one infant. "She won't break," he said calmly. Eliza hesitated, then nodded. From that night on, the work was shared. Days blended into a fragile rhythm. Caleb learned how to warm milk without burning it, learned which cries meant hunger and which meant fear, learned how to cradle an infant in arms used only to holding rope and iron. Eliza watched him in silence sometimes, stunned by the gentleness in a man the world believed to be made of stone. But the outside world had not forgotten her, nor had it forgiven her. The first warning arrived one evening with the mail rider. A folded note fell from the saddle into the dirt near the porch. No name, no seal, just words burned into paper with ugly clarity. She wasn't meant to live. "You stole what was paid for." Caleb crushed the paper in his hand. Eliza saw the tension in his shoulders immediately. "What is it?" she asked. His silence answered her. "They're coming," she whispered. Not as a question, as truth. By the end of the week, shadows lingered at the far edge of the property. Riders who did not approach. Hoofprints that vanished into rock and brush. Eliza felt watched, even in daylight. One evening, as dusk bled into night, Caleb returned from checking the perimeter with a rifle resting openly against his shoulder. "They won't stop," he said flatly. Eliza pulled the babies close. "I won't run again." He studied her. "I know." Something cold passed between them. Not fear, war. The attack began with fire. A bottle shattered against the barn roof under cover of darkness. Flames licked into dry timber. Horses screamed in terror as heat burst outward. Eliza awoke to Caleb shouting. She clutched the babies instinctively. "Stay inside," he commanded, already racing for the door. Shots cracked through the night. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. Eliza backed into the far corner of the house, shielding the infants with her body. Fear surged, but she did not collapse. She had already been broken once. She would not break again. Outside, shadows moved with practiced violence. Men paid for cruelty. Men who believed ownership came with coin and blood. Caleb moved like a ghost through the flames, returning fire with ruthless precision. Every shot was calculated. Every movement deliberate. The barn burned fiercely, but the attackers had underestimated the man they hunted. They had mistaken silence for weakness. Inside the house, Eliza realized the attack was not only from outside. A window shattered inward. A hand grabbed for her. She screamed. Instinct turned into fury. She seized the iron poker from the hearth and swung with every ounce of strength left in her body. The man collapsed in a strangled cry. She stared at what she had done, shaking violently, but the babies were unharmed. Blood dripped onto the floor. She did not faint. She stood. By morning, the land was scarred with smoke and bodies. The attackers were gone or broken. The barn still smoldered. Caleb stood in the dirt, injured but standing. Blood streaked his arm where a bullet had grazed him. Eliza approached him slowly, with all three girls pressed to her chest. "You're hurt," she said. He shook his head. "You're alive. That's all that matters." She looked around at the destruction. "They will come again," she whispered. "Yes," he replied. "Which is why things must change." The next weeks transformed the ranch. Word spread that Caleb Gray was no longer alone. He fortified the land, built higher fences, dug trenches, armed himself openly. The quiet ranch became known as a place no one entered without permission. More importantly, something changed within the house. Eliza transformed. She no longer flinched at every sound. She no longer whispered when she spoke. She named her daughters openly. Clara, Grace, Hope. Each name chosen with intention. Each name carved from survival. Caleb listened quietly as she spoke them aloud each night. One evening, as the wind rattled the shutters, Eliza finally spoke what had been burning in her chest. "I don't want to leave when this is over," she said softly. He did not answer at once. "This land was never meant to stay lonely," she continued. "And neither were you." He looked at her then, truly looked, not as a woman he rescued, not as a burden he protected, but as the mother of children he had helped reclaim with blood and fire. "It won't ever be over," he said. She met his gaze steadily. "Then we stop surviving," she replied, "and we start living." For the first time since the fire that stole his family, Caleb finally believed such a thing might be possible. But danger was not finished with them. The traitor Eliza had defeated was powerful. His allies were many, and vengeance, like greed, was hard to kill. The final confrontation was coming, not as a raid, but as a full reckoning. The wind carried an unnatural stillness over Caleb's ranch that morning. Even the horses, usually restless at dawn, stood quietly in their stalls. The girls' soft coos and tiny cries echoed through the house. But outside, the world seemed poised, holding its breath. Caleb stood at the edge of the property, rifle in hand, scanning the horizon. His eyes narrowed. Dust rose faintly in the distance, a warning sign he had learned to read. Men were coming. Many men. Not just for theft or intimidation, but for revenge, for money, for pride. Eliza joined him on the ridge, the three girls strapped securely to her chest and back. She had learned quickly how to move across rough land, balancing her burden without faltering. Her body still ached, but the fire in her chest burned brighter than the pain. "Do you think we can stop them?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb's jaw tightened. "We don't stop them by asking. We stop them by making sure they never try again." She nodded, swallowing her fear. "Then let's make sure they never try again." The first attackers arrived as shadows against the rising sun. Mounted men, armed and reckless, surged over the ridges like locusts. Their shouts carried over the wind. For a moment, The ranch seemed small, fragile, unprepared. But Caleb had spent weeks preparing. Trenches, hidden pits, and barricades made this land a fortress. He had learned their methods from experience, their arrogance and their greed. He had also learned another truth. Fear could be turned into a weapon if wielded correctly. The first group approached the main gate. Caleb stood behind a makeshift barricade with a rifle, counting, measuring, and waiting. He whispered instructions to Eliza, whose hands now were steady, whose eyes burned with determination. She nodded, understanding without hesitation. The girls would be safe. She would ensure it. When the first rider reached the gate, Caleb fired. The shot rang out, precise, hitting the lead horse in a way that threw its rider violently into the dirt. Chaos erupted immediately. Men scrambled, their orders drowned in the panicked neighs of terrified animals. Eliza moved silently toward another vantage point, rifle in hand. She had never fired before, but her aim was fueled by a mother's rage. Every movement was calculated, every breath controlled. She did not hesitate, did not falter. 2 more men fell before they even realized she had moved. The remaining attackers, seeing their numbers dwindle and confusion spreading, tried to regroup. They underestimated Caleb's preparation and Eliza's courage. One by one, they were forced back, retreating over the hills in disorder. The ranch, once fragile, now radiated strength, a fortress of survival and defiance. When the last attacker disappeared over the horizon, silence returned. The smell of smoke lingered. Dust settled over broken fences and scattered tools. Eliza sank to the ground, clutching her children, exhausted but alive. Caleb approached quietly, resting a hand on her shoulder. She did not flinch. She did not recoil. She had survived the impossible before, and now she had done it again. "You did well," Caleb said quietly, his voice carrying pride he rarely expressed. "We both did," she replied, her eyes scanning the horizon to ensure the threat was truly gone. For the first time since her daughters were taken, she felt a true sense of control, a sense of family, a sense of power. Not power to harm, but power to protect. And that was stronger than any weapon. Days passed in cautious rebuilding. The barn, charred and broken, was replaced with sturdier wood. Fences were reinforced. Traps were set, not for cruelty, but for safety. Caleb taught Eliza how to defend herself properly, how to read the land for danger, how to anticipate threats before they arrived. Each lesson was a reminder that strength was born of necessity, and survival demanded courage. Eliza, in turn, taught Caleb patience in a way no manual or solitude could. She taught him laughter that was not hollow. She taught him how to hold hope, even when the land itself seemed harsh and unforgiving. Together they rebuilt not just the ranch, but the fragments of lives that had been shattered. And in the evenings, when the girls were asleep, they would sit quietly on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the hills. They didn't need words. Silence held meaning enough. There was understanding, gratitude, and something else, connection. One afternoon, as Eliza hung freshly washed clothes on the line, she noticed Caleb working in the distance, fixing the fence where the attackers had torn it apart. She walked over, the girls in tow, each one giggling and reaching for her hand. "You never talk much about the past," she said softly. Caleb paused, leaning against the post. "Some things are better left buried," he said. His eyes softened slightly as he watched her smile at the children. The past teaches you how to live in the present. Eliza knelt, holding the girls close. I think the past taught me that family isn't just blood. It's those who stand with you when the world wants to tear you apart. Caleb looked at her. Something shifted. For the first time, he let himself consider the possibility he had denied for years. That life could hold more than sorrow and solitude. That perhaps this woman, broken yet unyielding, was not just someone to protect, but someone to trust, someone to care for, and maybe, just maybe, someone to love. The sun dipped low as night approached. The land was quiet once again. The ranch no longer felt like a solitary outpost. It was alive with laughter, cries, and small feet running across the dirt floor. The girls had names now: Clara, Grace, and Hope. Names that symbolized survival, joy, and resilience. Eliza watched them, her heart full, yet vigilant. She knew the world could still be cruel, could still demand sacrifices. But now, she was not alone, and her daughters were safe. And Caleb, stoic, silent, and steadfast, was no longer just a rancher. He was family. She looked at him. "We did it," she whispered. "We survived," he corrected. "And we're together," she added. Caleb met her eyes, and this time he didn't look away. His hand reached for hers, simple, firm, steady, a silent promise that he would remain, not just as protector, but as partner. Together, they had faced the world's cruelty, fought for what mattered most, and had not only reclaimed their children, but forged a new life. The night settled over the ranch, stars bright above endless plains. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the world still spun with greed, cruelty, and chaos. But here, in the quiet heart of the plains, a mother, a father, and 3 daughters had created something unbreakable. They had created home. And for the first time in years, the night was truly peaceful.